Hi, I'm Britton, and I'll be introducing our group presentation on identification and classification of microorganisms and their diversity, focusing on algae and protozoa. Some things that we know about algae: they are plant-like protists that live mostly in water and capable of photosynthesis. They are unicellular or multicellular, and they are classified by their photosynthetic pigments and other characteristics like cell structure, storage products, and genetic data. First, we have euglenophyta, or euglenoids, pictured in the top right corner. They can be fresh or salt water, and they lack a cell wall, but they are covered by a protein-rich layer called a pellicle. They can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. Next, we have chrysophyta, which is golden brown algae or diatoms. They are the most abundant type of unicellular algae with 100,000 different species. They are fresh or saltwater, and diatoms are more common than golden brown algae. Then we have pyrophyta, which is fire algae. Unicellular algae that's in oceans and some freshwater. They use flagella for motion. There are two different classes, dinoflagellates and cryptomonads. Dinoflagellates are the algae that can cause a red tide, and they are also potentially poisonous to humans and animals by disrupting muscle function with a neurotoxin. Cryptomonads may also produce harmful algae blooms that make the water red or dark brown, and some of these species are bioluminescent. Then we have chlorophyta, which is green algae, which is typically in freshwater but fewer in the ocean. Their cell walls are made of cellulose, and they have one or two flagella. Thousands of unicellular and multicellular species, and some examples of this algae are sea lettuce, horsehair algae, and dead man's finger. Rhodophyta is red algae that's typically in tropical marine locations. They have no flagella or centrioles. They grow on solid surfaces, including tropical reefs, or attached to other algae. Cell wall is composed of cellulose and many types of carbohydrates. There are many different seaweed types that are rhodophyta. Next is paeophyta, which is brown algae. It's among the largest types of algae, including varieties of seaweed and kelp found in marine environments. Some examples are rockweed and giant kelp, which can reach up to 100 meters in length. And then lastly, we have xanthophyta, which is yellow-green algae in freshwater typically, but also in saltwater or wet soil environments. Least prolific type of algae, only 450 to 650 species. Unicellular, and with cell walls made of cellulose and silica. Their chloroplasts give them the yellow-green pigment, and they usually form in small colonies of only a few cells.
So for reproduction for algae, there's asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. For asexual reproduction, the first one that I read about was binary fission, and this is commonly seen in unicellular algae. This is a process where a cell will divide into two identical daughter cells. There's also fragmentation, which is commonly seen in multicellular algae. And what this is that essentially it's a part of the parent organism will break off into multiple pieces, and each fragment will develop into a new genetically identical individual. And then lastly, for asexual reproduction, there's spore formation, and this is commonly seen in zoospores and aplanospores. And what this is that it's specialized structures within a parent cell that produces spores to grow into new identical algae. And something that I found interesting was that zoospores are motile with flagella, while aplanospores are non-motile because they do not have a flagella. And then as for sexual reproduction, the first one that I read about was isogamy, which is the fusion of two similar motile gametes. And then there's an isogamy, which is the fusion of two dissimilar gametes. Both are motile but are unequal in size. And then there's ogamy, which is the fusion of an egg and sperm cell. The female gamete is larger than the male gamete, and the sperm is motile while the egg is immobile. And also something that I found interesting with this is that the egg has stored food reserves to provide nutrients for the zygote as it's developing.
Algae has many different medical importances: nutritional values, medicinal uses, health benefits, and pharmaceutical roles. The nutritional values include protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. Medicinal uses are antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, antibacterials, and antiviral compounds in the algae. Health benefits are improved heart health, liver function, blood sugar regulation, and even cancer prevention. Pharmaceutical roles are bioactive molecules used in drug discovery and nutraceuticals. Note, safety does depend on quality control. There is a risk of contamination. Dosage is also not always well studied.
Now we have protozoa that are unicellular eukaryotic with no cell walls. They're the most motile out of fungi, algae, and helminths, and most ingest organic compounds. They are classified by their method of movement, starting with amoebas or sarcopenia that use temporary finger-like projections called pseudopods. Flagellates or mastigophora move using long whip-like flagella to propel themselves. Ciliates or ciliophoran use numerous short hair-like projections called cilia that beat in a coordinated way to create movement. And lastly, apicomplexans or sporozoan that are typically non-motile adult parasites that move by gliding.
So for protozoa, there's also asexual and sexual reproduction. For asexual reproduction for protozoas, the first one that I read about was again binary fission, and this is where the parent cell divides into two identical daughter cells, and we commonly see this in amoebas and among other different types of things. Second was multiple fission, and this is where one cell divides into many daughter cells as once. The nucleus undergoes multiple division, and it's commonly seen in parasitic protozoas. And then I also read about budding, which is the process, which is essentially a small outgrowth or bud forms on the parent cell, and eventually it will completely detach to the point where it will be able to become its own new individual. And then lastly, I read about plasmotomy, which is where multinucleated protozoa cells divide into daughter cells without prior meiotic nuclear division. And the result of this is the formation of multiple nuclei within each new cell. And then as for sexual reproduction, the first is syngamy, which is the fusion of two gametes to form a zygote. The nuclei of both parent cells fuse together, and the second one is called conjugation, which is the temporary union of two cells to exchange genetic material. This process involves both types of divisions to produce haploid nuclei, and this all occurs via a cytoplasmic bridge regarding the different exchanges between the cells. And then lastly is autogamy, which is where a single cell undergoes reorganization within itself. And this is still classified as sexual reproduction instead of asexual reproduction, because even though genetic material comes from a single parent, the fusion of male and female gametes still has to occur to form the zygote.
Protozoa has many different medical importances, positive and negative. Negative means disease causing, positive is involved in research and medicine. Negative importances include causing major human diseases, malaria, amoebic dysentery, giardiasis, toxoplasmosis, and trichomoniasis. There are also significant global health burdens. Malaria alone causes millions of cases and deaths each year. Challenges are drug resistance, lack of vaccine, and difficult diagnosis/treatment. Positive importances include used as model organisms in studying cell biology and immune responses. Some protozoa contribute to the development of new drugs and vaccines by revealing targets in parasites. Another is an environmental role, helping to maintain microbial balance in ecosystems, which indirectly support human health.
This slide highlights the role that nurses play in the Christian worldview. In Matthew 25:36, the Bible says, "I was sick and you looked after me." For Christians, this verse is a reminder that caring for the sick reflects Christ's love and compassion for all of us. Nursing is not only a profession, but it is also a calling to care for those who are suffering, to give medical treatment and comfort. By carrying each other's burdens, Galatians 6:2 says that nurses fulfill the law of Christ, which means that every act of love, care, and help is significant spiritually. Microorganisms like protozoa and some algae can cause serious illnesses such as malaria or amoebic infections, which can bring a lot of suffering around the world. Nurses play a really big role in this with giving treatment, educating patients about prevention and safety, and giving hope and Christ-like compassion during these times of sickness or pain. From a Christian perspective, this is a way of serving what Jesus called the least of these in Matthew 25:40. Caring for patients with infections is more than a job or medical responsibility. It is an opportunity to reflect God's love, bring comfort, and serve Christ through caring for others.